we have virtual roadshows. We'll be broadcasting from here in Nashville, Tennessee, to everyone across the state. A little bit of background about our roadshow series. A number of you have participated, no doubt, with the chamber throughout the state at various manufacturing locations. Denise Rice as well has done these over the years. I believe our first year of doing them was 2017. We started those as an effort to really highlight that Tennessee Chamber. We also are the Manufacturers Association. We have been since 1912. We have a deep focus around manufacturing issues, supporting and helping manufacturers so that they can be as successful as they can be and facilitate public policy in and around for manufacturers. So I'm going to walk through today. We have a number of great presentations that we're very excited about. And I'll start off and then we'll go to TBA and and then our panel discussion. But before I dive in, I do want to take a minute and thank all of our sponsors today. Our presenting sponsor, TVA, thank you. And there we go. And then all of our other sponsors, Innovate Consulting Group, Toyota Tennessee, Lee Company, Aetna, First American, Bridgestone, Elliott Davis. And so thank you all for your sponsorship. Without sponsorships, a lot of the activities that we do, aren't able to happen. So thank you all again for your sponsorship. So to kick off, I wanted to give you all an overall update of really manufacturing in Tennessee and set some background for the Tennessee Chamber and the Tennessee Manufacturers Association. A little bit about our history, what we do, Tennessee as a strong manufacturing state. So first of all, the Tennessee Manufacturers Association, we were founded in 1912, started off in Chattanooga, Tennessee, really by a group of manufacturers that were protesting back property assessments that the state was trying to collect on them. They said it was unfair and immediately thought we need a group that works, lives in Nashville, that goes and represents the manufacturing community in Tennessee, that brings up our issues and everything. So some of the first things that we went right to work on, first of all, Tennessee's right to work statute, I believe, was enacted around 1929. There, Tennessee Chamber played a key role in Tennessee being a right to work state. Tennessee's workers' compensation program, I believe it was founded in 1933, and the Chamber's been a part of every major, modification that's happened. The most recent was in 2013. There are a number of tax exemptions that manufacturers hold in the volunteer state. Manufacturers do not pay tax, sales and use tax on their energy consumption or their industrial machinery that the Chamber worked to get passed back in 1983, which has saved collectively, I believe, about $2 billion in tax payments from manufacturers through the years. The single sales factor as well, which was enacted in 2017, drastically changed the way that franchise and excise tax is apportioned to our manufacturers. Overall, it lowered the tax burden of manufacturers to the tune of about, I believe, $200 million a year. So we were happy to have that passed. A number of other states had passed it, and we went into our legislature and to, at the time, Governor Haslam, and talked about how important that was for Tennessee to have the single sales factor for manufacturing. TOSHA and environmental regulations, it's deeply embedded in our culture to help manufacturers be compliant. They run major facilities and they have to be compliant with occupational safety and health standards. Also, environmental regulations. We have full-time staff. We're one of the only state manufacturing associations that have a full-time environmental staff that really works to provide input from manufacturers to the Tennessee Department of Environment Conservation or regulated entities. Also, we host a number of seminars and events all across the state, this being one of them today. And I want to thank Carolyn and Susie for all the work that they do, especially as we've all transitioned really to a more virtual environment. But those seminars and events, they range from topics, really anything that's relevant to manufacturing or public policy, we work to engage in. We want manufacturers to communicate to legislators. We want to talk to them about important issues. Engaging with legislators is a very important one. A lot of times we find that people don't understand how many changes have happened to manufacturing. What a great work environment it is, how the wages that an individual can earn, and overall career opportunities. So we work in our legislature to inform them about the activities of manufacturers, how active, Tennessee's a major manufacturing state. There's a lot of production that goes on here. We've facilitated plant tours with a number of them over the years. So that's a key element of our work, is to really educate elected officials there. We also work, it's very important to us that we work to enhance the perception of manufacturing overall, that we note that there's tremendous career opportunities. We've done that through a number of initiatives. One of them is the work ethic diploma, which basically shows that a high school graduate that has completed this has great soft skills, that they can be able to work in a plant environment, at a manufacturing facility, work in teams and get along. Also Manufacturing Day, we work to promote that across the state. We encourage manufacturers to open their doors, talk about the things that they make and career opportunities. And after the pandemic, hopefully Manufacturing Day will get back to a little bit more normalcy. In addition, and more recently, pandemic liability protections. The Chamber, we worked diligently this past year to enact those in August. Really, we heard from a number of manufacturers that the pandemic, had really put everybody on their heels. But for you all who either distributed PPE, who were shifted operations to making PPE, or those that had to stay open because you are a crucial employer, you're an essential business. You wanted to make sure that you did what the government asked you to do. You followed their guidance, that you should not be held to a standard where you could have lawsuits that could jeopardize in any way your operation. So Tennessee, luckily, is one of a number of states, about 15, that have passed that into law, and we're glad to have that here. Workforce policy is another one too for us. It's really a lot more recent, but when we hear from manufacturers, what are the real challenges that you have, workforce really comes up to the top. So we've worked, the Tennessee Chamber supported the Tennessee Promise program, which includes free technical college across the state. So that's a little bit about us, our history, and we'll go to the next slide, Carolyn. And just as a note, all the background pictures here, I thought we'd get some live shots where the chamber is out. And this is where Kelly, this is right before she got her hand slapped for touching it. No, actually, she was telling me what this was. This was Dura in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee. So a little bit about Tennessee manufacturing. Tennessee's often considered really a top 10 state in the nation. When you look at our economy and how much of it is generated from manufacturing, it's about 15.32 of our total output. It employs 11.4% of our workforce. Now, keep in mind, that includes all employers, even those in the government sectors. So it looks a little bit lower, but when you look at just private employment in Tennessee, manufacturing actually ranks number 2. We employ over 357,000 employees. And one of the things that's more concerning to people too is that there's 5,000, about 5,300 to 5,500 firms that are out there. Most of those firms are under, they average about 60 employees. So most of them are under 100 employees. So there's a lot of smaller firms really all around the state that are in a variety of sectors. Another thing we work to highlight for manufacturers is that the average annual compensation is significantly higher whenever you compare manufacturing to all other industries. At $70,521, there's not a whole lot of other occupations that get that high, considering the amount of time that you spend in school, or from the skill set that you can have and be that successful. So that's compared to $44,406 average for other employment opportunities that are non-farm. So we try to brag about that and talk about that. When you look at Tennessee's strength overall, the sectors that we have, these are all listed in order of their prominence. One, motor vehicle and motor vehicle and automotive parts is number 1. Food, beverage, and tobacco. That's number 2 overall. When you look at Tennessee's manufacturing, there's a lot of food operations, a lot of food processing operations, and also a lot of tobacco manufacturing as well. Chemicals come in at number 3, fabricated metal 4, and I believe they're with appliances. So fabricated metal appliances at 4, 5B machinery, then paper manufacturing, and then plastics and rubber products kind of round out the more prominent industries or manufacturing areas. So as we go, this slide, many of you know, this is Eastman up in Kingsport, Tennessee. I believe Eastman has been declared. I don't know if we have anybody with Eastman on us here today, but they're a great member of our organization for a number of years. And I do believe they have the largest chemical manufacturing facility in North America up there in Kingsport. So it's a substantial operation. So a lot of people, whenever we look back at the history of manufacturing, you know, how did kind of Tennessee get to where we are? So I want to talk a little bit about, you know, where we currently are in our history. So as I mentioned earlier, Tennessee almost always falls in the top 10 to 15 states for manufacturing. The reason for that is looking at the total economic activity and total employment in our state and the size of the firms. Typically, you know, Indiana really does come at the top. Obviously, Michigan is strong too. Actually, California comes up fairly high as well. But Tennessee has certainly worked to enhance our overall manufacturing climate so that we can continue kind of draw in, you know, manufacturing firms across the state. We've been noted as the #1 state for automotive manufacturing, I believe, for about 3 to 4 consecutive years. So Tennessee's prominence, which really started about in 1986, whenever Nissan located their first major manufacturing operations here, has grown substantially. Where now we have 3 OEMs, you know, Nissan, GM, and Volkswagen, and a vast number of tier 1, 2, and 3 suppliers across the state do these automotive manufacturing facilities. I talked about the economic impact. One reason that manufacturing is important to Tennessee is the ripple effect that manufacturers have in the state that really help a number of other industries. It's estimated that for every dollar paid in manufacturing wages, that results in about $2 that really ripple through the economy. No other industry sector has that kind of impact throughout our economy. You know, retail has a ripple effect of about, you know, 54 cents per every dollar that's paid. So manufacturing is really strong. It helps prop up small businesses, raw goods, trucking, maintenance, hospitality. There's a number of things that, you know, when you have large manufacturers or even small and medium sized, that they ripple throughout the economy, and especially paying stronger wages. Tennessee is in a good location. If you look, we're one of the only states in the nation that border, I believe, 8 other states. So we are a long state, and if you're going, you know, out west or up east, you really have to go through Tennessee or come close to us. We have water here, which a lot of manufacturing operations, you know, need to have water. We have energy through TVA and the services that they provide. It's a good, affordable energy. It's very consistent, which a lot of manufacturers really need. Our overall tax and regulatory burden is very fair. When you look at manufacturing operations, manufacturers like consistency and they like predictability, and Tennessee gives them that. It's a very fair, you know, regulatory structure. It's not kind of a gotcha like a lot of other states have. Also, our road and infrastructure programs have frequently are listed in the top in the nation. Overall, we directly fund our road program. We do not float bonds, so you know, we don't have any road fund collections that go toward paying interest or anything like that. They go directly to building roads, resurfacing projects and things like that. Also, Tennessee not having a personal income tax. We hear that from manufacturers. They like to locate here. I think it's good, you know, for their workers to be able to operate in a state climate here, you know, fair tax environment where they don't pay a personal income tax. Also, Tennessee recently has been noted for our workforce and education policy. We're one of the only states in the nation that fully pay for community college and technical college. You know, we have that, and in addition, the Hope Scholarship Program. So that has really enhanced Tennessee's numbers of children, you know, coming out of high school and going on to community college and technical schools. So, and that, which helps solve workforce concerns for manufacturers. Here we are down in Lynchburg, Tennessee, Jack Daniels. So we'll talk a little bit about through the series, through the meetings that we have about, you know, challenges and opportunities that manufacturers face. And we hear a lot about these through the surveys we do and a lot of the interaction that we have with manufacturers. You know, one, obviously workforce. Workforce really is one of the most concerning things we hear from manufacturers. They want to grow, but they have challenges through, you know, obviously a lot of retirements of highly skilled workers. And then newer ones that are coming in may lack, you know, certain soft skills or certainly technical skills that they really need at their job. In addition, a lot of individuals have a somewhat negative perception about manufacturing. So we want to work to change that. They think it's not maybe a field that's not for them. So we work to change that. Unemployment, we know recently was a challenge for manufacturers, especially with the enhanced benefit. Now that has started to expire, we certainly don't hear about that as much, but there's still a number of unfilled positions that we hear about really all across the state where manufacturers are looking for individuals to fill positions and they're having a hard time doing it. So that's a challenge to operations. Recently, the pandemic. Manufacturers were essential businesses. They were allowed to operate. Governor Lee, the chamber worked to make sure that Governor Lee specifically noted that if you're an essential employer, as defined by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's CISA, which is their cyber and infrastructure administration, that you could continue to operate. So in order to do that, manufacturers had to be compliant. So there were a lot of rules that changed frequently, whether it was CDC guidance, and I just saw the other day where OSHA issued another guidance. Tennessee had guidance. Tennessee Pledge. Local governments had guidance. When you're having to check temperatures, ask questionnaires, it created a significant hurdle for manufacturers. Manufacturing is already difficult, and then when you add all these different layers, there were a number of challenges that really manufacturers faced, including, if there is identified infectious diseases there, COVID, how manufacturers have to deal with those. Technology and automation is one thing that we're seeing from the pandemic is really an uptick in manufacturers looking more at technology and automation for their operations. So for larger manufacturers, they communicate with us about that they have plans to move toward this. But for smaller and medium size, a lot of times they have challenges in making that transition. So hopefully we'll talk a little bit about that. I know the chamber has been working with Denise Rice on a Smart Factory Institute, which would be really one of a kind in North America. And we're very excited about that. And Denise will touch on that. Trade and supply chain disruptions because of the pandemic, and also policy. We hear about that. In addition, political uncertainty, also COVID outbreaks. If cases continue to go up, that can impact manufacturing. It can impact supply chains. It can impact their workforce. The chamber, we've been proud to tell policymakers that when you really look and identify through contact tracing where most outbreaks of infectious disease happen, it's really not at the workplace, or it's certainly not at manufacturers due to the precautions that they take. So, and moving on. Just a few economic updates, and this is Smile Direct at their manufacturing facility, and Kelly may have to help me with where that is. That may be in Smyrna. With Smile Direct. Manufacturing, there's mixed bag, obviously of economic use for manufacturers. Manufacturers were allowed to pretty much continue to stay operating, but they've had to deal with a number of other disruptions. So when we look at the manufacturing sector and its kind of growth, when you just look at October, it really was the fastest pace since September of 2008 in terms of growth, which is very good. Very robust new orders. It actually was the highest since January of 2004. So we are seeing upticks in the manufacturing sector. New orders, you see, they've risen for 5 straight months, and employment has increased over the past 6 months, which both are good news. However, when you look at overall where manufacturing is, it is still down in total employment about 621,000 from where it was pre-pandemic. So now that the economy is starting to grow, we see this through the third quarter, it jumped to about 33.1%, which was really substantial growth for one quarter. However, even with that growth overall, manufacturing in the United States is down about 3.5% year to date. So whenever the shutdown happened, that's really when most everything just slowed down so much that we've really tried to catch up to that, and we just haven't been able to yet. Some of the good things in looking forward is when you talk to most economists about what are their forecasts for 2021, they put about a 4% total growth on it, and that is a tremendous growth, whereas in prior years, had been around anywhere from 2.8 to 3.5 in a really good year. So it's a tremendous growth forecast looking forward. there seems to be a lot of optimism from manufacturers. The Dallas Fed recently published their survey, so 60% of them expected rising production, which is really good. Only 11.5% anticipate decline. So all the remaining respondents basically said we think things are going to be stable, or they're going to stay the same in the near term. So that's a good sign moving forward. In addition, consumer confidence, we continue to see that it improves. As it improves, it helps a number of sectors, but it really does help manufacturing as well too, as people feel comfortable with making purchases for goods that they have. And next, this is John Deere, made in Greenville, Tennessee. I'm sure, Carolyn, is that you on there? No, but yeah, John Deere, Zero Turns, made in Greenville, Tennessee. Great member. Tennessee, we're focusing on a number of manufacturing initiatives we'll touch on. First of all, our roadshow dates. We hope you all can join us for all these, November 17th and November 24th. We do plan on having surveys out in the field for manufacturers as we start to determine our 2021 legislative agenda. There's going to be a lot of activity this legislative session. We're coming out of a pandemic, so there were a lot of things that kind of got brought to our attention. One was, if you're an essential business, you need to be able to verify that you're an essential business. It was very difficult whenever the pandemic hit, and people, policymakers said you can stay open, but how did you kind of verify that you could stay open? So I think us putting some thought into that. Unemployment policy, we're watching that extremely close. I will say Tennessee has done a great job of taking a portion of their about $5 billion in CARES Act stimulus funding and using $1 billion of that to shore up our unemployment trust fund. That has helped employers in a number of ways, and it's helped our citizens. One, it has propped up spending in a lot of rural areas and has resulted in a lot of money being put in Tennessee's economy, which is one reason our state tax receipts are still staying up. But also it avoided a massive tax increase on Tennessee manufacturers. If the fund drops below $1 billion, then we go into a different tax bracket, if you would, for unemployment. And the Lee administration and the legislature has prevented that from happening. Some estimating it's reduced or avoided a 300% UI tax increase on manufacturers. Tax and regulatory policy, we're always going to watch that. We do think there may be some things on the horizon that the pandemic's given us an opportunity to look at in a number of areas regarding Tennessee tax and regulatory developments, and we'll be in touch with that. Workers' compensation, we always hear, watch that closely. I know a number of manufacturers are always kind of nervous that if there is a COVID case identified, somehow it becomes a compensable workers' compensation case, and that can get to be a massive number of cases in a facility. We have not seen that yet, but we are watching workers' compensation closely and any impacts from COVID. And lastly, just want to touch on, I think Jim Skelton's with us today. We are very proud to have recently launched our Manufacturing Association Health Plan. And quite simply, we're going through working with NAM on this. This is a nationwide plan, and it is designed specifically for manufacturers. We hear from manufacturers that if we are create a healthy and safe work environment, we should receive a benefit from that and being able to lower our insurance premium. So we think this will give manufacturers an opportunity to save costs, and while allowing for a tailored plan for their employees, especially for small medium manufacturers. It's ACA compliant. Administration costs are very reasonable on it, and anybody can go get a quote today, and we hope you all will consider it. This will be the first year that will be totally or completely, for the full year, be out in the field with it. So we hope all manufacturers will take a look at this healthcare plan. Our goal is to make sure or is to develop products or opportunities to save manufacturers cost, and we think this is a really good program. So if you have any questions, please let us know. I think Jim Skelton's on. And I think we're at the end. Yeah, there's Carlex and Microport in Memphis, Carlex here in Nashville, Tennessee. So again, we want to thank you all for joining us today. And I'm going to make the transition and introduce Adam Murray and Joseph Birchfield with TVA. Adam's a senior target market specialist with TVA Economic Development Global Business. primary responsibility is to recruit advanced manufacturing industries to the TVA region. Target industries include aviation, aerospace, defense, advanced manufacturing, and European foreign direct investment. Adam, we're glad to have you with us here today. For Joseph, he also is a target market specialist for TVA Economic Development. His primary role is to actively recruit energy-intensive companies to locate and expand TVA's 7-state region. Previously, Joseph served as TVA Regional Development Specialist in Alabama, working with local power companies, community leaders, and state and regional economic development partners. Adam and Joseph, thank you all for joining us. We're glad to have you with us.
Appreciate it, Bradley. So Joseph and I, we're going to tag team this presentation. And so what we'd like to do is kind of give you an update on TVA economic development, talk a little bit about how the pandemic has affected electric power demand within Tennessee and within our region, and also talk a little bit about TVA's response to the pandemic and some of the things that we've been doing to help manufacturers in Tennessee and in our region to stay up and open. So the next slide kind of shows a little bit about kind of what TVA does. So our job specifically with Joseph and I, we're a target market specialist. So we're part of the attract piece of TVA. So TVA is a large, obviously over 10,000 employees, and within economic development, there's about 50 people, and 4 of us are responsible for attracting new manufacturers, new companies, working with the states, working with ECD in Tennessee to our region. And so I specifically, as Bradley mentioned, I work with advanced manufacturing. Joseph works with a lot of the power intensive industries. And so we have 2 other people, one person that focuses on automotive, so transportation related manufacturing, and then also Tyler Chaffee, who works with consumer and industrial products. So that's the team that makes up and attracting new industry to Tennessee and to the TVA region. The way we do that, so the departments that make up our group, just a little bit about some of the services that we offer right here, but we're the target market specialists. So once again, we're traveling outside the state, trying to bring new industry, trying to grow the Tennessee economy, and working with our partners at the state. And so I want to kind of give an update on what our region has looked like as far as the investment in CapEx and jobs that we've had for the fiscal year. So our fiscal year at TVA operates from an October to September timeframe. And so 67,000 jobs and $8.6 billion in capital investment is what we've had in the Valley. So you probably ask, well, what portion of Tennessee are those numbers? So of those 67,000 jobs that were created, over 45,000 were created in the state of Tennessee, about $5.2 billion worth of investment. So on a regular basis, about 60 to 68% of our jobs or capital investment that come into the TVA region is created within the state of Tennessee. The next question that you might have is, those numbers look great. So once again, our fiscal year just ended last month. How does that compare to the previous year? We went through a pandemic, or we're going through a pandemic, and actually our numbers in FY19 were 66,500. So and 8.9 billion CapEx. So it's interesting to see that the numbers that our region has recruited throughout the pandemic, even with the pandemic, are pretty much in line with what we saw in the previous fiscal year. Specifically during the pandemic, from March 1st through September, obviously we're still going, so these are the last numbers that we've turned in, but we're able to create 23,000 jobs and $3.8 billion in capital investment. Obviously, once again, this is working with our partners at ECD in the state of Tennessee and the local economic development offices and local power companies throughout the region. This number right here, 22,000 jobs, how much of that was created in Tennessee? Once again, it was over 14,000 jobs. So similar to what Bradley was saying, Tennessee's economy has continued to do very, very well, especially in the last 4 months. We're starting to see an uptick come back. I think in our region right now, at the peak of the pandemic, our unemployment TVA wide for the region was right above 14%. And as of September, we're back to 5.9%. So we're starting to see that unemployment go back down and continue to see jobs created within our region. So now we'll transition a little bit to Joseph, and he's going to share a little bit about some detailed information, how industry and electric demand was impacted and how that's trending right now.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So when all of this crisis began to hit our region, TVA had a number of really smart people starting to coordinate with our local power company. And if you're not as familiar with our arrangements, we have 153 local power companies that largely deliver that last mile. They're ultimately the power provider for the vast majority of all industrial customers, as well as every single residential customer across our 7-state footprint. So when all of this started to kind of kick up in early March, we started trying to track industries that were being impacted, that were being affected by this pandemic, and what that meant for us. The way that we were able to track it through conversations with our local power company partners, our direct serve customers, and then some of our local economic development stakeholders that we work with was load reduction or some kind of partial or full operation reduction. And so that this first slide I want to talk about is that load, what that load profile looked like, and broken down into some of the more notable industry sectors. Bradley referenced those top sectors that the state of Tennessee has, and this is aggregate data from, I should note, this is aggregate data from our entire service territory. But metal, chemical, automotive, you see it here. They were some of the industries in the very beginning of this pandemic that were dramatically affected from a load perspective, reducing their operations. And you know, I think I read that from a trade association over the summer. It was a chemical trade association over the summer. They predicted that they were going to see somewhere around 9 or a little over 9% of a decline in production, which could ultimately result in you know, tens of thousands of jobs lost. And so that production decline is reflected in this load loss. And so some of the TVAs and some of our local power companies, the largest single customers are in that metal, chemical industry sector. And when we start talking about load loss, then that obviously for an electric company reflects in revenue loss. Now, one thing I'll say that we did not on the front end of this take into consideration was what it means for, you know, all of us that are sitting at home right now still, like myself, that are still working from home, and how a work from home situation presents a balanced load shape for when we have industries that are reducing their operation or fully reducing their operation and sending individuals home, and how that could balance out what we were seeing. So that's kind of one piece of it. Wanted to show that. You see that obviously in that. I wanted to break it down into some of the more early stages. The June and July timeframe represents where we saw a continued uptick of reductions and customers that were impacted. And then October, the most recent one, you see that it's more companies are beginning to come back online. And then the next piece of it is the total number count. So if you think about the previous slide, it was load. So single, you know, individual industries that represent large chunks of the load, whereas this slide is total customer count. So automotive sector is the one that stands out. It was greatly impacted by the sheer volume of the total number of companies that were impacted across our 7-state region. And you see that they're having some steady improvements in how they're beginning to get back into their production, getting back into the facility. And you know, this is just our read on it from the periphery. But whenever you have a crisis, a health crisis come into a manufacturing environment that's unique and it's unfamiliar to a lot of people, you're forced to change some of your operations and your manufacturing processes and how you bring in people and the PPE and the social distancing and such. And so that took some time to implement, I'm sure, from what we're, you know, just reading data from the outside. And then as they start to become a bit more familiar with how to handle that, you see that companies and industries as a whole were finding ways to get back into operation.
Thanks, Joseph. So just a few slides on how TVA Economic Development and what we did to respond to this pandemic. One of the things that you'll know or to know is that TVA Economic Development, on a regular basis, we have what we call an economic recession task force that's made up of different groups within TVA Economic Development. And we're always kind of preparing, what can we do from a programmatic standpoint? What can we do to help companies? And we're always prepared. That team meets on a regular basis. And we had been meeting most of last year, getting ready for it with an election cycle, getting ready for 2021, not knowing exactly what was going to happen. And so luckily we had a lot of the solutions that we're going to put in place already kind of fleshed out and ready to go because of that effort. And so I'm not going to read all these different things that TVA did, but we were able to change some of our incentives to work with our local power companies to provide credit for them to help them with their customers. And so you see the total number, about over $200 million of funding was allocated to local power companies over the next, already been allocated, and then that money going forward to help with residential, help with industry as well. We've changed some of our incentives, and I'll show some of that in a little bit to help existing industry going through this pandemic. So once again, over $200 million of funds, and we were able to do that because the last 8 years we've cut hundreds of $millions out of our O&M, which has allowed us to be in a financial situation to do this. So luckily, TVA was in a good position going into this pandemic to help a lot of our customers.
Yeah, so I'll go into the next slide, Adam. I know that one is mine. I think one thing that I'd like to kind of tip our hat to is the feedback that we receive from you all, from the industries, from the local power companies, from our partners at local economic development organizations and other stakeholders across the state and region. Without this feedback loop, we're not able to respond to what is happening in the marketplace in that moment. And so when you see us have the ability to deliver, as Adam noted, 200 million plus in different types of resources, we couldn't have done that on a pivot, on a moment, without the feedback, without that continuous communication that we have with you all. And so we really appreciate that feedback that you deliver to us. On the incentive front, if you're not familiar, so the performance grant is a discretionary cash incentive that TVA Economic Development has that we leverage for competitive projects where if you're an existing industry, for example, and you have a plant that's within our footprint in Tennessee, and say there's another location in Indiana or Michigan or elsewhere outside of our region, those dollars from a corporate perspective are competitive. And so anything that we can do as a partner to help you position yourself as a local facility in our region to be more competitive for those dollars, for that investment, we want to do that. The performance grant is that discretionary cash grant. What we did is that we found that there are some locations, these SOC, they're special opportunity counties or economically distressed communities, that their competitiveness relies more heavily, or our influence, our dollars can go a longer way if we find that flexibility. And that was, and so that's one of the developments that we've had through this, was developing some flexibility, some lower thresholds for these SOC communities where they may not see the volume of projects, or the projects may be a little bit unique, and some of their capital investments or jobs that these projects are projecting are less than what you may see in some of our more active regions across Tennessee. And so we wanted to try to respond to that, understanding that Governor Lee and his administration does have a focus on rural development. And in some cases, though it's not a one-for-one translation, the SOC counties, the special opportunity counties, in some cases are largely rural communities. And so we wanted to see how we could play a role in supporting that. The other piece of it is the technical service. And if you're not familiar with our organization structure, the economic development organization structure, so we have civil engineers, GIS specialists, landscape architects, and others to help us represent a site, to help us represent a building, so that this is not engineered stamped, but this is illustrative. This is for a company that's looking at an expansion or a new development. and they're trying to help communicate this site's development potential to a board or to their executive team. Oftentimes what we find is that visuals help communicate that, help sell that story, sell that long-term opportunity much better than just laying out a Gantt chart or talking through it in a slide deck. So our technical services team designs and works through some of these mapping features to help position communities and companies in a better light for these type of projects. Well, during the pandemic, we're not doing on-site visits as often. And so we had to, again, pivot. We had to find ways where we could develop training programs to help our local economic development partners, our state partners, be prepared for that. Understanding that, this is how you want to set up a Google Earth profile and some of the layers in it. Maybe these are some of the platforms, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, WebEx, whatever it is, how you leverage these resources. And if you go back and look at the slide previously when we were talking about some of the resources that we poured into it, we provided TVA Economic Development provided a telework grant, giving to the economic development community saying, hey, you're going to be working from home. All of your stuff's at the office. You can't go back to the office. You're not working in the office for the next 2 months. Here's some money to maybe help you set up some work from home situation, or if you need to improve your internet at your house or at your workplace to make sure that you have the bandwidth necessary to do what we're trying to do today. So all of this comes, again, as I kind of spoke from the top, with information, feedback that you're giving us.
Thanks, Joseph. And just a couple more slides, and this is obviously specifically for you, the members of our Tennessee industry in Tennessee. So the investment credit is a product that we have within economic development to help lower the cost of your power. And so this is done through the local power company. And we've actually, one of the pivots that we made was to make the threshold. So for existing customers that are on this program in Tennessee or in the Valley, we've reduced what the plan book value needs to be in order for you to qualify for this. So it went from 35% to 25%. So if you're on this program and you're going to make another investment here in the next few years, definitely get with your local power company or your TVA rep in your region to learn about this. And that, not only that change, but the other change we made was to reduce the minimum power demand. So it used to be 500 kW, now it's 250. So you might be eligible for this program, whereas prior to the pandemic you weren't. And these will be in place for the foreseeable future. And then the last change that we made to help with recruiting companies, but also companies that are already in Tennessee, is a Workforce Plus program. So for a long time, TVA Economic Development has struggled. How do we play with this need to develop talent and workforce? And we didn't want to replicate or duplicate anything that the universities or the TCATs or the community colleges were already doing. So now through this program with Workforce Plus, it's actually funding that we can get to a company to pay for maybe some costs that weren't eligible through a program with ECD or through a community college program. So it's how we play in the workforce. So some of the examples that have been used, that when you're creating new jobs, we've put some workforce dollars into buying equipment for training and things like that. So this is the new program that we've kind of switched or created right during the pandemic to help with companies that say either come to Tennessee or expand in Tennessee. And I think we'll maybe do questions at the end, but Bradley, back to you.
Hi, thank you, Joseph and Adam. We appreciate your time today and for presenting and our relationship with TVA. We don't have any questions in the chat right now, so we appreciate your time so much in that presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Bronson, who will introduce our next speaker.
Jeff, I think you might still be muted.
See, major faux pas, stayed on mute too long. So, all right, so now, all right, I get to repeat all that. So I've got the pleasure today to introduce Miss Denise Rice. She's president owner of Peak Performance, Inc. And I did a little research on that company because I had not known a lot about it. And it seems like we have a lot of synergies with them as well. I think she comes quite well qualified and highly touted because she's a consultant for the TMA. She's been an operations executive I've been a director of operations, a plant manager for, I think, Owens Corning and some other folks. Just a great resume. Looks like a great organization. And without further ado, Ms. Denise Rice.
Well, thank you, Jeff. And yes, I'm happy to be here and have had a long relationship with the Tennessee Manufacturers Association and the Tennessee Chamber of Commerce and Industry, both as a consultant and as a member. So I'm happy to be here today. I'm going to just spend a few minutes talking about the impact of technology and automation during the pandemic and what that impact has been. You know, we're taking a look and talking about the workforce and what's happening to us. And we know even before the pandemic that baby boomers in the manufacturing industry are retiring, and they're set to take their knowledge and their robust skills with them. And in addition to the retirements that we're seeing, we also had a decreasing unemployment rate. And you can see there that little spike right there is just because of the pandemic and what occurred in April of this year. We are starting to see a decline, and we do expect for it to continue to decline as we have a vaccine that becomes more widely available. But with the unemployment rate decreasing, which meaning there's less people that are available to work, in addition to the people that were retiring, we were starting to see a real labor shortage, particularly in the manufacturing field. And then we couple that with Industry 4.0. And when I talk about Industry 4.0, I'm really talking about the fourth industrial revolution since the 18th century. It's an all-encompassing term that refers to the way computers, data, and automation are evolving and how they're coming together to change the way that we the way that we work. And in particular, it's having a big impact on manufacturing. And we've been talking about this and preparing for it. But what we've seen is the pandemic is accelerating that adoption rate, and it's really pushing us more quickly than what we were prepared for into the Industry 4.0. And you can see this on a daily basis. Some of the things that we're seeing, you know, as far as, takeout and delivery is being impacted, checkouts, non-contact checkouts, and things like that. The other area that the pandemic is really impacting is the level of public health and what's acceptable now for public health. I just visited, my daughter lives in Honolulu, Hawaii, and I was just there last week. And the extent that the airline industry is going in order to ensure that people feel safe, there's never going to be a time when we say, it's okay, Delta, you don't need to clean my tray table anymore. We now have that expectation and that requirement that they will continue to keep that level of public health. But back on the technology side, we're moving faster and faster than what we were prepared for, which causes a huge workforce problem for us because we already had a deficit, a labor shortage, and now we have a skill shortage. I'm not going to go through all of the items around the factory of the future and what that smart factory is, but the elements that really make up that are systems integration, cloud-based computing, collaborative robots, additive manufacturing, augmented and virtual reality, big data and analytics, and cyber physical systems. And last year on our manufacturing roadshow, we asked and we took real live polls, and we've compiled the data and turned into say, what does that mean? And what we asked our manufacturers here in the state of Tennessee is, at what stage would you estimate your organization is on the smart factory technology adoption curve? And this was prior to the pandemic. We saw that they were very early in the awareness and building knowledge. The majority of them were. Now, some of our larger companies are a little bit farther along with early adopter or being an integrator, but the majority of our manufacturers are at early awareness building and knowledge. We did, however, ask, are you planning on increasing investment in the smart factory technology over the next 12 months? And only 8% of our manufacturers said that they were not. So 92% are considering some type of investment into automation. Remind you, this was prior to the pandemic. We asked them over the last 3 years, what application or use has your organization deployed? And by far, systems integration and cloud-based computing and storage are the number 1 and number 2 applications that we're seeing. And then you can get an idea of some of the other type of applications and where they stand in relation to that. And then we asked, what is driving you to create your smart factory roadmap, and 72% of the respondents reported that it was for improved operations. And Bradley mentioned earlier in his opening about the impact on small and medium-sized businesses, and technology now is becoming more and more affordable for our small and medium-sized business, and it's not going to be an option for them. It's going to be a requirement of them to be able to compete in today's global environment. And this technology at the same time is bringing global access available to small and medium-sized businesses. We did ask them what challenges that they were having in developing or implementing their smart factory technology roadmap. And there's probably no surprise that the lack of expertise and skill set was the #1 challenge in implementing Industry 4.0. This was followed closely behind cost and investment, as well as the return on investment or uncertain results. And we have seen a lot of decrease in cost. So while I do see that challenge is there, we have an answer for that challenge. The lack of expertise and skill set continues to be a real problem for manufacturers today. So then lastly, we said our last question for them is which items would be most beneficial in building and implementing your industry roadmap. And industry to technology networking sessions was the #1 item that would be most beneficial, followed right behind by conferences and workshops, which during the pandemic we're unable to really do that unless we're doing it virtually. And then thirdly is working in interactive exhibits. Turns out us manufacturers, we like to kick the tires and really see how something works. And so being able to have a working exhibit is really important to us. And so in order to answer all those questions, we're taking a look at the modern manufacturing. We know that $2.2 trillion is going to be added to the domestic GDP by just in the next 5 years by Industry 4.0. We also know that 86% of manufacturers believe that they're doing everything they can to adopt a smart factory technology. However, given that only 25% of manufacturers are confident that their workforce will have the adequate skills that are needed for smart factory technologies. And then lastly, 73% of our US manufacturers are not prepared for the industry adoption. The public-private partnership is something that we are introducing, and we're trying to establish a Smart Factory Institute. It will be a U.S. exclusive institute providing manufacturers with connections, collaborations, certifications for improving their process. And our proposal is that will exist right here in the state of Tennessee, which we're really excited about. We have 3 areas, connections. So we'll be taking technology companies and connecting them with manufacturers. We'll be creating collaborations, which will include academia. And then we'll be providing industry certified certifications, because it's tough to take those incumbent workers that we're trying to upskill and reskill them and push them into a degree program. That really is a better fit for them would be to do industry recognized certifications. So in the interest of time, I'm going to share with you just a quick video that explains this probably better than I can.
The Chattanooga Smart Factory Institute is a public-private partnership endorsed by the Tennessee Manufacturers Association and operated by Performance. It is an exclusive U.S. institute providing manufacturers with connections, collaborative relationships, and certifications for improving manufacturing processes by providing them with access to the latest technology in advanced manufacturing. The Smart Factory Institute is one of 6 global academies led by the Deutsche Mesa Technology Academy Company, located in Hanover, Germany. Since their inception, they have built a comprehensive international network of production technologies across the world. At the heart of these networks are the world's leading industrial suppliers of manufacturing technology. The Chattanooga Smart Factory Institute will ease the transition to Industry 4.0 for manufacturers by facilitating intensive networking between suppliers and users of key technologies to optimize production processes, paving the way for a more innovative workplace. The Industrial Organizational Psychology Master's Degree Program at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga is one of the longest running and well-respected programs. Industrial organizational psychology is the scientific study of how people function within work organizations. When it comes to translating technological innovations into real business results, the University of Tennessee can help manufacturers address how tomorrow's technology workforce will be different than today's and what skills and capabilities will be needed. The Volkswagen Academy in Chattanooga, Tennessee provides a prime location for the U.S. Smart Factory Institute, as it will allow manufacturers the opportunity to experience and learn new innovative technologies and accelerate the adoption of technological advancements in both the workplace and the workforce. As the manufacturing industry continues to evolve with the rise of Industry 4.0, this initiative brings not only a remarkable opportunity to the Chattanooga area, but also names the state of Tennessee as a groundbreaker of the fourth industrial revolution, designating us as leaders of advanced manufacturing in the United States and ultimately placing us at a competitive advantage.
So with that, I want to say thank you, and I apologize for the volume. I came right from a previous broadcast, and I had to modify my volume for that. So I apologize for that if you weren't able to hear that. But you can check us out on YouTube. The video is there if you'd like to take a look at that, or you can contact the Tennessee Manufacturers Association or reach us through our website. We'd be happy to support you any way that we can. So with that, I would like to, let me get out of there. I would like to introduce Jeff Bronson. In 2005, CEO Jeff Bronson formed IBC as a ERP consulting firm based in Knoxville, Tennessee, focused on ERP and application integrations. In 2010, Jeff Bronson partnered with now ICG president and ERP systems, Nick Weber, to form Innovative Consulting Group. Over the last 10 years, ICG was transformed into an end-to-end manufacturing technology firm focusing it on IT, ERP, and integrations. Jeff is a Tennessee native and a University of Tennessee and University of North Florida alumni. Jeff's roots are in Tennessee in manufacturing, and his passion is providing solutions that deliver results in our industry. Previously, Jeff worked as an IT director at several manufacturing companies with a focus in medical device and HVAC industries. And Jeff has worked as an IT and ERP technical consultant with Infor Inc. for 5 years prior to starting what would become Innovative Consulting Group Incorporated. Jeff?
All right. Thanks, Denise. I need to write a shorter bio next time, obviously. So I'm pretty good at that. So I'm going to build on what Denise kind of presented. I mean, I'm going to tell you a little bit about ICG today. I'm going to give you hopefully some good information. I've got my sales director also, who is much more than a salesman. He's been a consultant. He's been a guy on the floor. He's developed applications within manufacturing. So Roger Wydell is here with me as well. Actually, he's presenting from Rochester, New York, I believe, today. So
correct.
Exactly. So hopefully we'll get started and leave you guys. And I also wanted to thank everyone for the sponsorship and including us here, and we'll get going. So just a little bit about ICG, because I feel like we're the new guys on the block, even though we've been around for quite a while. We're really a manufacturing technology company. Someone asked me, what do you do? Well, we support all aspects of manufacturing, whether it be your shop floor, your business processes, and the technology that delivers it. I think that's key. Whether you want to host it, whether you want to be in cloud, or whether you need a custom application developed or an integration done, because we believe thoroughly that everything should speak and talk together and come from one true source, as we like to call it. So we're truly end to end. We're based out of Knoxville, Tennessee. And again, we're Tennessee native, Tennessee guys. I think Denise hit it really well. The pandemic has forced a digital response. It really has. I mean, and in manufacturing, we all kind of are behind the curve. I think some of the statistics shown earlier kind of say that, whether it be an infrastructure technology or the ability to adapt and deliver, core applications, or have people work from anywhere. I don't say work from home. Today, it's work from anywhere you need to work. It can be your car, it can be your home, it can be out on the lake on a boat. That's my preference, but wherever. So I think what COVID has done and the pandemic has done is really pushed us forward, and it's really exposed where our industry is weak. As Roger likes to say, when the stream's low, those rocks are right there and you're going to hit them, right? They're very high. So I think we've really got to improve. And in order to fully recover, what everyone has to realize from a C-level perspective is that this will continue. This will become the new norm. It is the new norm. And if you've not kind of planned for this or already begun to do it from a long-term perspective, you're pretty much a little bit late to the party. Roger, anything to add to that?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Real quickly, just one of the things that we need to highlight is that things are not going to go back to the way they were. And as you say, you're already late to the party if you've not adapted. And we know a lot of folks in manufacturing and throughout the country that they've had various degrees of success. Those that were well prepared for work from anywhere have done well. Those that are not are struggling. And sooner or later, they're going to have to come to the realization you're going to have to adapt to it, and that's just the way it is.
Yep. And a little anecdote around that, and I love to tell stories, so that's my challenge, by the way, is to keep this in the 15 minutes. But most recently, one of the things I like to tout is ICG worked with, we'll say, the top pharma testing company manufacturer in the world today to expand their operations. They had to get these test kits out and done and built, and 2 new plants had to be stood up. And it really took an end-to-end response. And they had a legacy manufacturing ERP system in the background that didn't, let's say, run very well in a mobile world, right? It didn't expand and deliver. So they contacted us because we happen to be one of the few left that still support that. And from an IT perspective, from an ERP delivery perspective, and a process perspective, Nick's team, Jerry Hook, our CTO, his technical team, and of course, Roger and I, we went to work and we helped them get that done. And that kind of shows who we are. I mean, we are really strong in those areas and we love to help. And of course, I think making a huge difference in the world today, because I'm not the doom and gloom guy. I believe this really has opened the door for manufacturing in the Americas specifically, and around the world, of course. But an investment's going to occur, and a large resurgence is happening. I believe it's a long term, not a short term.
And the saying is, in chaos lies opportunity.
Absolutely.
You just got to be prepared to seize the opportunity.
So again, this next slide, I was doing some research for this to try to impart some really great information, and this really hit me. This is our customer base, and we do a lot in the mid-tier manufacturing market. From an IT perspective, we're at the enterprise level, that's for sure. We're down to the small business. That's not a problem either. We scale it. But when you really look at it, and I think, again, I'll tout Denise's slide, it kind of reinforces as well that, no one really has the plan, only about 25%. Even at the large company level, they don't have as much of a strategy as they probably need. And of course, the pandemic has exposed that from a weakness standpoint. And they all know they need to do it, but it's just not the biggest priority either. And that's changed, of course. And then funding, surprisingly to me, because I struggle with a lot of the CFOs at times to get the proper investment, but the funding seems to be there. And I think the reservation there around funding is back to the knowledge base and the availability of experience in doing this in the industry. They've been snake bit before, or they've come up short, or they've thrown money at it and there hasn't been a result. So from my perspective, I think that's really probably what's holding them back. I think the funding's there, or the ability to get the funding, and through grants, TVA, everybody else. There's a lot of ways to fund these initiatives that need to move their business forward. And again, almost 65% of them are saying that they can fund it themselves. IoT is right there. Again, I'll mention Denise. I'm giving a lot of plugs there, Denise. But the short answer is that's interconnected technologies throughout the business, throughout the plant, shop floor, salesmen, customer service, you name it, e-commerce, whatever you want to put in there, everything is connected. Everything's talking to one true source. All information is being fed in real time so we can make great decisions and also let our people focus on what truly is important to the business.
Yeah, one quick follow-up comment, and that is, and we've seen this over the years, is that folks typically do budget to spend the money that they need to for IT, technology, whatever. And then what happens is they are sold a nice new shiny machine for the shop floor. And it's like, well, IT is going to wait till next year. And they don't do that spend. And then another year happens and the same thing occurs. And what happens is you get down the road 5 years and now you're behind the curve because you've not invested where you need to. Granted, you've done the things you should be doing for your shop floor, but for your back end, for your IT, you're not current. You're not spending the money where you need to.
So the next slide is a little bit of I'll call it a semi-shameless pitch, but it's our mantra around here. Everybody has their values, their core values, etc. But one of the things about ICG, it really is our approach. And I developed this graphic a while back to help all of the manufacturers that I work with really kind of understand how important technology is for them. It all starts with a foundation. Now, that foundation can be a mix of all kinds of technologies integrated with different systems, hardware, cloud, hybrid, whatever you'd like to be. What really drives the technology need is the goals, the processes, and the applications that deliver those. So, but without the foundation, I can't do any of it. I just have this lofty goal. And of course, recently, I just made sure we added in the cog of their security. Everything is thought about in securing your data, in securing your business, protecting what you have to ensure that no one else gets it and that you're avoiding any kind of downtime. So Roger always likes to use the anecdote of, don't build your house. You wouldn't build your house on sand. And that's truly what it is. We see, especially in the mid-tier market, we see a lot of great technologies purchased that aren't interconnected, that don't work well together, they don't talk. And really that comes back to the experience, knowing what pieces work for what type of industry within manufacturing, whether you be furniture, automotive, chemical, we work with them all. So I think for us, I wanted something really simple, and I think it hammers home for everyone really how important all the layers of technology are, because without it, we don't get to deliver that special sauce that is our processes and our products in manufacturing.
And the thing we've seen over the years, especially with smaller manufacturing companies, is that we've lost the concept that we manage IT as a foundation for the business, as a key differentiating capability for the overall manufacturing capability. And we don't really invest in the education, the expertise, and the resources to do so. And what happens with, again, over time, nobody knows how to run the systems that you have, and entropy kind of sets in, and you don't have near the system that you need to aptly run the business.
Absolutely. So another story from Jeff, but it hit me. My daughter's in the Pride of the Southland Marching Band. I'm a very proud dad, Tennessee alum. She's a senior this year, so if we can get them all on the field for at least the last home game, that would be great. If any Tennessee powers that be are listening in. But in attending all these high school and other functions, my kids were in the band, and you hear the warm up, and the warm up is horrible. You've got clarinets and trumpets, and they're all just tuning and going off, and it's almost deafening. You almost have to leave the room. It sounds so horrible. And then the conductor steps up. He puts them all together. Each of them play their part, and it comes out just beautifully. Of course, we're a little prejudiced because we're the parents, but still, it's a symphony, right? Everyone's playing their part. Everything's doing what it needs, and that really is our foundation, right? We designed that technology to work together along with those applications, delivering everything you need. So I like to tie it to simple stuff, and that one kind of hits home for me because I recently had to attend one of my son's warm-ups, and it was deafening, let me tell you. All right, so let's talk about technology is a differentiator. I think the world kind of agrees with this. And the pandemic has changed it, right? It's forced it forward. Working from home, learning to be disciplined to work from home. You know, ICG, we have consultants all over the United States. We have Mexico, Canada. Nick has a team that works overseas as well. As a matter of fact, Nick travels overseas, has been to Hungary and Dubai and several other places in the last year prior to the pandemic, of course. So getting all these people to work and do the discipline and what they need to do, but first also, do they have the tool sets they need? And the strategies around that. And we see it a lot in the mid-tier. Again, we talk about that a lot because I think that's where the largest gap is, that they bought inexpensive, free, leveraged technologies they didn't quite understand. And yet they got that, we'll say, interface to them, that desktop, that environment that they needed. But the adoption of it was kind of received from a grouchy perspective from the end users. So again, knowing what pieces go together, how to put them together, how they need to talk together, and the role of the person working remotely. Everybody's mentioned that on their presentations today. That role is so important. And one of my, again, just a short story is I have a customer up in Indiana, and they have 5 plants. And obviously the COVID quarantine net affects us all, right? And I told him, I said, well, we've got to utilize and leverage the technologies we placed a few years ago so that you can work remotely. And their ERP is a legacy as well. And he said, well, Jeff, I can't make product from home. I mean, just shut me down hard. And I said, you're right. You know what? You can't. But when that net is cast, and maybe it takes out 1/3 of your production line, and none of them are going to get sick, thank goodness, right? That's probably the odds, but they have to quarantine. So now you've got temps and other people. These guys happen to be automotive, and they're only going to be about 10% effective out there on the assembly line, really, when you think about it. So what we did was we used all that technology that we gave him, and his team, who was quarantined, could work from home and at least quasi guide the temps and the folks out on the floor so that they were more productive. We haven't had a number to measure that yet, but the feedback is it's been amazing, right? They've been able to help them. So I think thinking out of the box is important. Thinking how to leverage these technologies is hugely important. From a goals perspective and the processes, right? Your business drives the technology you need. What you make, how you make it, all that uniqueness goes to it. And I think executive leadership needs to look at a bigger picture, and they need to help in all levels and understand the strengths of their team, right? What their gifts are and where their deficiencies are, and know how to help them fill that gap, build a strategy around it. It's not just about technology. As a matter of fact, we say that's the easy stuff for us. It may not be for a lot, but the reality is how to put all those pieces together, recognize where you need to fill those gaps, get a good plan, architect things properly, and implement. And then, of course, make sure there's great adoption and great support. And then we've kind of hit on this so much, I don't need to hit on it more. You've got to be able to work wherever you are, whenever you are, smartphones, tablets, whatever you're using, whatever you pick up becomes a device and a gateway into the business. And I think it's so important that no matter what you need, even a legacy ERP system that really hasn't been upgraded since 2000 can be delivered that way. You just have to understand the pieces that go together to do it. So before I go too far, I mean, I'm not going to get deep into how to design all this, but no matter what you do, from ERP system design, process, shop floor automation, to the data center, we believe in modularity, right? Modularity allows you to expand and grow very easily. It also allows for updating and maintenance to happen, right? You can bring down components, and if you have redundancy and high availability, like we typically do in the environments, you can still keep things up and running. You're highly flexible and you're highly mobile. So when you're architecting this stuff, or we're helping you architect it, it's really critical that you need to be flexible. And I say that without compromise, because you just don't know what's going to come at you next. whether it be a pandemic or whatever we've got, or a hurricane that moves up to the central southern states here. I mean, you just never know. And the world keeps throwing some bricks at us. So we've got to be prepared. And then you got to secure everything. Email, endpoints, you've got to do the basics. You've got to monitor those things. I can't tell you how important security is. And that kind of leads me to the next slide. Unless Roger has a comment, I'll keep us moving. So you got to protect everything. And we see this a lot. We've done 3 ransomware remediations this year for Fortune 100 and Fortune 1000, we'll say, companies. And it's pretty scary. We've seen companies call us with, a ransomware attack, and it's infected their backup. So I always tell people, your architecture around this stuff, how you design it to work together, how you implement it is so critical, because in this case, their backups were infected. They had to pay a ransom. I'm not here to spread fear by any means, but in today's world, you can't afford not to do these types of things. And backups, disaster recovery, all of that is available. It's very affordable. It's not the enterprise level cost, because you can get enterprise level product service for mid-tier costs nowadays. You just have to know what pieces go together and how to put them together. So I just can't stress enough about security, because every week it seems to be something that hits the news. Every week we seem to be getting involved, at least from a data center, from an ERP restoration. The last one we did had 16 different ERP and distribution systems that along with the data center we had to bring back online. And it's really fun to recover a bunch of SQL databases and systems from almost from scratch, let me tell you. So the other piece to everything is to keep the lights on. So while we're adjusting to the pandemic, our attention's over here. It's not on watching the house and protecting the house, or maybe even maintaining the house. Because, in a small IT department, everybody runs lean, enterprise included. You just don't have enough hands. So the question is, where are you deficient? Where do you need? Where do you have need? Make sure you maintain your infrastructure and applications. Make sure you're doing your system monitoring. And I use the word SOC. I saw that earlier in the TVA slide, and I thought Security Operations Center. Obviously not, but it's a still similar acronym. So you've got to have monitoring from a security standpoint, monitoring from a network operations center standpoint, monitoring and maintaining your ERP and distribution software. I can't stress that enough. Every time we take a phone call, it seems that they've left out their databases, they've left out their ERP, and it's just been sitting there and like, well, it just kind of runs and we reboot the system when there's a problem. That's not the world you want to be in. It's not a world that helps you move forward. So keep making sure that you're doing all of that maintenance. And then on the other side of it is make sure that the customers, those are your folks on the shop floor, in your finance departments, wherever they are, make sure your customers are getting great support. Every organization needs to focus on those end users, those end clients. It's not about the tech. It's about making sure they have the tools, the resources, and they're working the way they need to be. And when they pick up the phone and says, I can't get a label, and you're holding up an EDI shipment, right, an ASN, as we say in automotive, then they're getting immediate support and someone can service them. It's so critical. And again, we're looking to help with this transition. We're kind of in a triage. A lot of companies are still there, and they're just not, they're forgetting about these pieces, or they just don't have enough people to do it. So again, I wanted to hit that up or mention that. And from our perspective, we do managed services across the whole organization, but we do them in pieces as well. And I put some of those on the right because I think that makes us a little unique in the world. We know that you just need help in certain areas, and you don't need us to do everything, and we can be part of that team. And I think that's critical no matter what resource you choose. There's trust, there's transparency, and they're performing the job you need them to do. Roger, any other comments? I was going as fast as I can to keep it in.
Yeah, I think you've hit the high points. So, the key is with taking it back to COVID and the impact on the business and how companies are responding. Definitely the time is now. If the business is slow, if you know it's going to start coming, things are going to start happening, the time is now to do the investment, make the changes you need to do to get in front of when you are busy again. Don't wait. Because once you're busy, you don't have time to do anything.
And just so everyone is aware, again, I'm on the positive side of this as the leader here at ICG, but man, it is a fun time in manufacturing right now. Challenging, of course, but I'm hearing so much optimism out of our customer base, and it's highly diverse. I think Tennessee has a great opportunity to grow in manufacturing investment to improve. Again, here in Knoxville and being a Tennessee boy, I'm highly vested in that. And I think the sky is the limit. I don't think it's going to be doom and gloom much longer for some folks. And manufacturing, I think, has proven here recently how resilient of an industry it is. As I told a lot of my customers, I said, who would have thought that for the majority of us, we are thriving at the end of this crisis, and the future is very bright. So I think that's a huge win for our industry. And with that, I open the floor to any questions, comments, and we do appreciate y'all's time and letting us be a part of this.
Great. Thank you, Jeff and Roger, so much. And ICG, I know you had your contact information up there, but if anybody else needs a follow-up and didn't catch that here at the chamber, we'll be happy to put you guys in touch with them. So thank you. I'm not sure, Bradley, if you're still on and have any closing comments, but if you don't, I am going to add in the chat here, just kind of one last thing. All right, and that is coming in the chat. You're welcome to download that. You all received it as well via email, but it's the Recovery Roadshow program. Our next scheduled date is Tuesday next week. So the next 2 weeks, the 17th and the 24th. And we'll have a few more details added, but the program there covers our topics for each of those remaining sessions, and we'll be adding the speakers in there by the end of this week. So a little more detail for you. But again, we do want to thank our sponsors. We've got TVA presenting, ICG, which just spoke. Thank you again, Jeff and Roger, Toyota TN, and then silver level, we've got Elliott Davis and Lee Company. And then at our bronze level, we have Aetna and First American and Bridgestone. So thank you guys so much. We couldn't do it without our sponsors. So want to make sure that we say thanks as often as we can. So we'll see you guys next week. We'll send a reminder again and hope you can join us for the rest of the series. So thanks so much, guys, and have a great rest of the week.